Welcome, welcome. Ready to rock today. Give everybody a chance to get here, and then we will jump in to today's webinar. Super excited about this. If you're coming in, let us know. Let me know where you're from. Let me know where you're coming in from. Use the chat, please. Use the chat. Use the Q&A. Love to actually be able to answer any questions that you have any conversations, things that are germane to how do you actually join the top 1% of sellers. So we are super fired up today that you are here. Coming in hot and heavy. So good. People on time and early. I don't know how that happens in this day of Zoom. I don't know about you all, but the amount of time I spend waiting for somebody to end a meeting to attend a meeting certainly seems to be more time than I ever would have anticipated. So awesome. Good to see you. Good to see you. See people coming in right now. Colleen, good to see you. Keen, Kristen, Mike, Stephen, William, awesome to see y'all. Where y'all coming in from? Where are you in this great world that we have? We've got clients from Seattle to London to Costa Rica, so all over the place. So Chicago, Stephen, love that. My family is from Chicago. Awesome. Philly, love being downtown Rittenhouse. Haven't been there in a few years, but I don't care what they say. I think Central City is pretty cool. Houston, used to work for a company that you probably know pretty well called Good Old Insperity. Big publicly traded company. I know they do a lot of good down there. Knoxville, I'm jealous I haven't been there. If I remember correctly, William, one of my good business associates, I guess, that we do a lot of stuff on Zoom, actually lives in the Knoxville area. Is it Knoxville? I think it's Knoxville. Yeah, it's James Buckley. Don't know if you've seen him or heard of him, but he's kind of in this crazy world of sales, training, and consulting and such. Price, Mike, Kevin, everybody, welcome in. Well, guess what? I'm going to do the one rare thing that nobody does these days, and we're just going to get rocking. And we're going to do that because you all are here. It's on time, and it is time to go. So please hit us up in the chat. If you've got questions as we go through this, I promise you that this webinar is for you and for you to get better at what you do and for you to understand how to. So I am somebody who's not afraid of any questions that you might want to ask. So please feel free to do that, and we will get started right now. Give me a second. I'm going to share my screen up. All right. So you should be able to see my screen at this point, which is great. And let me make sure that I'm still able to see each of you all. All right, questions, chat. All right. Of course, it's going to give me a little bit of a hard time. Why would it make this super simple? All right. All right. So I will come in and I will check momentarily, but there's a Q&A button that you should have on the webinar, and that'll let you ask some questions that'll get funneled directly to me. So in case you had any doubt as to whether or not this is live, I think we probably answered those as we go. So awesome. Here we go. So let's rock and roll. So today I'm super excited because what I want to share with you are some of the strategies, secrets, and even steps that we've used to drive over $1 billion in sales success for companies. Understand this though. That all starts with the individual rep having the opportunity to be successful. And that all starts with that person understanding how can they become better? How can they become more effective? So if you've ever felt stuck, frustrated, or maybe even uncertain about how to elevate your sales game or that of your team, stick with me. Because I promise you, I'm going to show you exactly the process that you need to do to get better at sales. So let's talk about what we're going to discuss today. So today we're going to share the strategies and the secrets that we talked about. We are going to get into the various things that you can do that will actually help you improve your ability to create more wealth for you and for your company if you're a CEO, et cetera. We're going to talk about how we've been able to help top performing sales teams boost their win rates by 500%. I'm going to give you some of the insights that we got from training over 1,000 salespeople to outperform And then we're going to let you know and find out how to take your career or your company to the next level. Our goal here is really to show you that there is an actual way, a process, a plan that you can follow to move through and become better at sales or to improve the sales of those people around you. So, first, let's talk about this. Let's make sure you're in the right place. Last thing I'd want you to do is get a half hour into this and be like, I don't know why I'm here. So let's talk about this. So you're in the right place. You're here if your chances are you're ready to solve big problems, right? Maybe your team struggles with consistency. Maybe you struggle with consistency. Maybe you're prospecting and your pipeline's getting full, and then all of a sudden there's nothing in it and you're working on closing deals. Maybe you're a CEO who's watching revenue slip in this kind of weird time that we're in, despite hiring what you feel is the best talent. Because I want you to know you're not alone, and we're going to tackle this together. So if you have an interest in improving your ability to sell, and particularly sell in the B2B space, I think you're really going to love what we talk about today. With that, real quick, I don't want to make any assumptions that any of you actually know me, know Revi, understand what it is we do. So just real quick, why should you listen to me? Well, because over the last actually 7 or so years, I've worked with businesses of all sizes, from startups to unicorns, which are those companies that are privately held and worth more than $1 billion. So we've seen what works and what doesn't, and what you need to do to break through those barriers. We've scaled businesses where I've personally been involved as a W-2, leading a business from 2 to 78 million in 5 years, trained more than 1,000 salespeople, and consulted with more than 150 CEOs to uncover the challenges and the solutions in order to help them effectively grow their businesses. And so we've got a track record, but I'm going to tell you that the other thing that we've got going for us today is that we have proprietary research that we did called the State of Sales Skills in 2024. That proprietary research gave us a roadmap to say this is exactly how you improve somebody's sales depending on what they already know. And so that's a big difference between what you've seen in other approaches. Because what we're saying is if we can figure out where you are, then we know how to put a plan together to make you more effective. We don't want to just give you the random closing plan, the training, the thing, if it's not meeting you where you are. Now, let's understand, right? Underperformance doesn't just affect our bottom line, it's a morale killer. So we know that in the first half of 2024, 75% of sales reps missed quota. Now, the good news is many started to make that back in the final half of this year. And so where we're at now is I'd say probably about 45% of sales reps will end up making quota in 2024. But if you go back historically, that's just kind of the number. So if you've had a sales career or if you've had a sales team where you feel like sometimes it's just like flipping a coin to figure out exactly whether or not you're going to make a number, it's because it is. It's literally not much different than a coin flip. Unless you're somebody who likes blackjack, and then you would understand that even if you play it perfectly, the odds are still in the house's favor. And so it's more likely that you'll miss that number than you'll make that number. Now, the average sales team turnover rate is 34%. Now, at the company level, I think we understand what that means, right? Well, it's a lot of turnover. There's people, we're hiring stuff. But let's talk about it, what it means to you as the individual rep, if you're an individual rep. And what it means is this. It means that you're potentially changing jobs every 18 months. Because these numbers say there's complete turnover of a sales force on average once every 3 years. And we know that the average turnover rate of essentially anyone in sales, from the head of sales all the way down to the SDR, is that 30+%. And so we're doing something wrong. It's the highest turnover rate of any profession in the world. And I think the reason that we see that is this, because most teams, management structures, et cetera, lack clarity on which core skills matter the most. You hear a lot of kind of people talking about it. Oh, there's this thing that matters, and there's this thing that matters. Oh, consultative selling. Oh, driving traction. Oh, like there's all these different things that people talk about. But my real question is, do they actually know how to train you on that? And then when we talk to CEOs and leaders, they cite sales as their biggest bottleneck to growth. They don't say, oh, we've got too many leads. Oh, we got too many sales. Sure, it happens once in a while, but it's not very often. And so that's costing us. And if you think about it as an individual seller, right, at the individual level, that's robbing you of even more than that. It's robbing you of your ability to do the things you want to do to provide for your family, to make sure your kids are in the right school. Maybe your spouse wants to decide whether or not they work or don't work. But think about stacking those challenges. If you're changing jobs every 18 months, you're not hitting quota on average, maybe once every 2 years. How hard is it for you just to get ahead? And that's what we want to try to solve today for you, for companies. We want to try to help you understand like exactly how can we put you in a situation that you know you're on the correct path. Now, I will say something as we're doing this. I don't know what in the world's going on with Zoom, but I can't see Zoom at all. So if you're asking in the chat and you're answering something, the one thing I can see is the questions and answers right now. So I apologize for that, but just being real with you, it's part of the real technology component. So there's a Q&A button that's down there on your window. If you've got stuff you want to share, please put it in there because I'd absolutely love to be able to address any questions or comments or concerns that you might have. All right. So let's get into this. So we did a research report last year, and we did it with one of our partners called Objective Management Group. And I was trying to answer one simple question because when we talk to CEOs, VPs of sales, salespeople, we get a lot of this. Yeah, we've had sales training. Didn't see any real results. Yeah, we had sales training. 6 months later, nobody on the team remembered what they were doing. We remembered what that sales training was. And so it was all this kind of hubbub like, well, if we know what we do is effective and we know that sellers need it, then why in the world isn't it working? So with that, we're talking about building the perfect salesperson, right? And so in building the perfect salesperson, I wanted to ask that question. Can you build the perfect salesperson? So what we did is we set out and we took the results of a specific assessment that we do that we'll talk about later that measures the 21 core selling competencies and a host of other things. And we took the data from 12,744 assessments. So it actually wasn't 13,000 plus. That's a typo. It was 12,744 assessments exactly. And we said, okay, what are the 21 competencies that separate the best from the rest? How much better at some of these are you if you're elite in sales versus if you're a bottom of the barrel, just kind of getting by and maybe you shouldn't be in sales at all? And then if we can determine those things, is there a way to put a step-by-step guide tailored to each individual seller's unique strengths? And what was awesome about it is we found you could. The data supported that we can absolutely build the perfect salesperson. And so I'm going to share with you a 3-step process that we can go through where you can actually get the things you want in life, do it with less pain, do it with less stress, and become the top level seller or the top company in your industry. And so we're going to talk through that right now. Okay, so what does it take? Mastery is not about luck. It's about following the right path. And I'm going to show you how to take the guesswork out of how you level up and how you become the number one salesperson in your company. You become the number one company in your industry from a sales effectiveness and efficiency perspective. We've had companies that have deployed this as an example that we've helped turn around from the edge of bankruptcy. They grew 122% in the next 18 months. This isn't about luck. This is about putting a plan in place that helps us actually level those teams up. So the 3 steps for elite sales success that lead to the clarity, the confidence, and the consistency that you're looking for are: first, we want to diagnose your sales DNA, which we'll talk about in a second. The second thing is we want to build an unshakable mindset, one of grit. And then third is we want to master the high impact skills. Now, what's interesting is most of the time when you'd walk into an environment like this, I'm pretty sure what you're hearing from people is this. You're generally probably hearing, oh, do this. This is how you close better. This is how you do a better job prospecting. These are the tricks of the trade that you need to use. Well, what they don't talk about is, do you have the commitment to do the thing? And do you have some of the things, maybe the way you were raised, maybe your predisposition towards how you've seen salespeople or sellers or others like you in the past, that get in the way of you actually executing on the types of things that will help you be successful? And so we talk about it from a mindset, a willing commitment, and a sales skills perspective. So let's go ahead and let's jump into step 1. So first, what we want to do is we want to kind of talk to it about what's your sales DNA? What do your tactical skills look like? Because we want to see what's holding you back. And one of these things that really comes around to it is we want to start pinpointing which of the 21 core competencies need work. And why is that? Well, because based on the data and the research that we have, we can tell you exactly the difference in how much better in a top 10% salesperson is than a pretty good salesperson, than an average salesperson is, than a poor salesperson is at each one of the 21 core competencies. So think about this. That then allows us to stack rank them according to importance. So I'll give you one that'll blow your mind. You've heard, whether you've been hired and worked for somebody or whether or not this is how you hire people, you've heard we all want the coachable salesperson. Coachability, so much so that many managers and CEOs take the shortcut of hiring ex-athletes because they think they're coachable. There's other reasons they work out that they're not thinking about. But what we found out in our data is the difference between the bottom 10% of sellers and the top 10% of sellers in coachability was essentially 0. That's a party trick. You can use that bet somewhere else and earn yourself a beer, a drink, or whatever you want from one of your friends who's in sales, because nobody's going to guess that the answer is 0. So what we do then is we compare your results with millions of sales professionals, because then we can understand your strengths and blind spots. So think about it this way. This is very much like if you're going to drive to Los Angeles, it's a very different route if I'm coming from Atlanta, you're coming from Chicago, you're coming from Knoxville, or you're coming from Houston. It's a very different route. So let's find out. One of the things you need to do in the beginning is you need to get objective data to find out exactly where you're starting, because that will change everything about what you do, the order you do it in, and whether or not you're successful. All right, step 2. Let's be clear that your mindset shapes everything you do. People ignore this in sales, but man, it is the biggest determining factor of whether or not you can execute on things you know. Because the top 1% of salespeople don't just necessarily work harder, they think differently. And so we have to rewire your approach for sales success. We need to overcome limiting beliefs like the fear of rejection. Think about it this way. Let's just talk about how things play out. We like to look at things on a behavioral basis. So if you have a certain trait or don't, what does that likely look like when you're selling? So if I have the fear of rejection, where do you think that's playing out? And I can't see the chat, but I'd love to have you put in the chat where you think this is happening. Because the fear of rejection is going to compromise your approach in many, many things. So, as an example, your fear of rejection in prospecting. Prospecting is all rejection. And that might be why it might be hard to get started or you can't get going because it doesn't feel right. Your fear of rejection could make it hard for you to actually handle objections or to seek out the reasons somebody might not want to do a deal with you in the beginning instead of waiting till the very end. It might cause you to lose control. The fear of rejection is something that can play out because it'll keep you maybe from asking for the next meeting. Something so simple, but so critical when you're talking and selling to somebody, right? If you end, hey, John, sounds like these are your things. Is that right? Well, cool. Based on that, I think we should do this as the next step. How does that sound? Oh, it sounds good. Let's schedule a call for next week. Let's schedule a call for next Thursday. How does Thursday at 10 look? But even that simple kind of example that I've given you can be incredibly difficult if you have the fear of rejection. If you have the need for approval and you want people to like or love you more than you want them to trust you and value you. Right? That may be if you're pre-negotiating discounts before your client ever even asked you to. How about supportive buy cycle? You probably sell a lot of the same ways you buy. If you're somebody who likes a lot of research and likes to comparison shop, you probably feel like it makes perfect sense for your clients to do it too, even if you've already progressed to the point where they said they were going to do business. So these are some of the things that are going on, and we can figure those things out. You need to develop a confident client-first approach. We've worked with more than 60 companies, and what I can tell you this is I would say it's a rarity, like one out of those 60 who actually had a client-first approach and how they ran their discovery calls or their first meetings and how they talked about it, their elevator pitch, their value proposition. If I asked you what's your elevator pitch today, right now, what's the first sentence you're thinking? It's probably, well, our company does X, Y, and Z, and we're the best because. But a great elevator pitch is client-based. We help CMOs just like you solve these exact problems. And it creates intrigue and it talks to their problems. So we have to be client-centric. And then the other thing, when we get these things smoothed out and we understand it, we can stay consistent even under pressure. Because if sales is anything, it's a pressure-filled position. I mean, think about it. There's a lot of people who aren't on this call today that argue with me about this. Right? But I'm going to say the following. It's the only place where you get measured 100% by the number at some point in your career. Everybody else can be a team player and all this other stuff. And well, that's 2/3, 3/4 of their total bonus, 3/4 of whether or not they get to stay in the company. But you can be the nicest person on the planet, miss your number for 2 years in a row. If you're still there, you won't be there anymore. Right? And there's that type of pressure. And if some of you have complex sales, you got to sell the outside person and then you got to sell the internal team. It's a super dynamic and interesting profession. Okay, so step 3 is we have to master the high impact stuff. The difference between the good and the elite is mastery of the right skill sets, because this step is about making you unstoppable. Now you can see just a quick kind of tidbit on the right side of the screen here. And what's interesting is this is the difference in how much better the top 10% of sellers are versus the bottom 10% of sales professionals. So look at number one. The top 10% are 740% better at closing. Look at number three, commitment. Right? Commitment is commitment without a caveat, right? I will do this no matter what. Instead of I will do this as long as it fits into my life and I can do this and these sort of parameters are true. But on that commitment scale, they're 476% higher skilled and committed. Look at the comfortable discussing money, 468%. Qualifying, they're 380% better at qualifying. Farming, negotiating, and the ones that might really surprise you. Can you believe that sales technology and CRM savvy made it into the top 15? As in, they're the top 15 differences between being in the bottom 10% and the top 10%. I found that just fascinating. It's because some things stack. Those who are really good at, say, sales process, those are good with sales technology and CRM. They understand process. And when they understand process, they do a better job of consultative selling and reaching decision makers and all those other things. So we've got this roadmap, we've got these ideas, and then we have them mapped by stages. And so what's absolutely wonderful about this is it allows us to put ourselves in a position to where we can go forward and actually know exactly when, where, and how to train. So I'm realizing one thing right here. This is the benefit of live stuff and when we custom make it for you. This is going to be a shorter presentation than you thought. So that's the good news. But I want to take your questions. I want to take your thoughts in the chat, et cetera, in just a second. But we do have an elite seller blueprint. I do want to say this because we forgot to put it up here. But if you want the elite seller blueprint, right, which is a more detailed version of this presentation, hit me up at info@revheat.com. INFO at REVHEAT.com. Because I want to make sure we get that to you because it was something we forgot to put into the presentation. So what do you do with these three steps and how do you do it? Well, the thing that you're probably asking yourself is, we're great, Ken. Well, how do I figure out where I am today? Because it sounds like the very starting point. And you're right, it is. Because once we start with that, we can run the other two plays, right? We can figure out what are the high impact skill sets that you need to get? What are we supposed to be doing with those? And then as we talked about here, how do we look at your mindset? Do we understand, do you have a skill set problem or do you have a conceptual problem? So with that, what we've done is we've been able to put together a plan essentially with our partner. And so your next step, if you wanted to do it, would be, I don't want you to let this be one more thing that you think about. I want you to take action. And so we generally we do this OMG sales assessment. We compare you against almost 3 million other professionals. We'll have a conversation with you on a one-on-one deal, which is typically $1,000. Plus we have the $1,000 OMG assessment. And today we'll do it for $400 for the next 24 hours. And so you can get access to that exact same thing at info@revheat.com. I wanted to make sure that when we did this webinar for you, that you'd have a way that you could figure out where you needed to spend your time, because this will be the most valuable thing that you ever find out about you, yourself, or your team when it comes to selling specifically. This is not a disc. This is not a predictive index. This is, hey, these are exact sales skills. Because whether or not you ever do anything with us from a business perspective beyond this, you'll know what books to go read. You'll know what to research online. You'll know exactly what areas you should focus on. And so just wanted to know, it's 60% off if you want it. But what I want to do here is I'm going to step back for a second. I'm going to remove the screen, see if there's any questions, because I apologize. Normally I would have gone a couple slides deeper on some of this stuff, but I want to be able to get into it if you've got questions that have come up. So I'm going to stop the share real quick. And then see, all right, so I'm in the chats. Now I can see y'all again. Who's got questions about what you do different? Who's got questions about how the elites sell better? We've got a good group in here. And I'd love to be able to talk to anybody who's got something specific that they want. And the first person to do it I'll get you a free signed copy of the book, which has our entire sales methodology, which has sold $1 billion. So if you've got a question, a comment, because as you know, like in anything in the world, it seems like we got to get one person to break it open. Otherwise, nobody else can ask questions. Stephen Flaherty, do you have resources specific to construction B2B sales? And the answer is it depends. And here's what it depends on. We have resources specific to construction B2B sales. Let me back up. As far as the assessment is concerned, yeah, we actually measure that against your specific industry. So whatever industry you're in, whether it's technology, construction, etc., we can measure that. William, I see that. Thank you. We can measure you against that from a standpoint, hey, where are you on your skill sets and how do you get better? Then when it comes down to, hey, are there specific training resources or methodology resources? It comes down to this. It comes down to the idea of we're really, really, really great at helping you sell, say, larger deals to enterprises. Say you're selling a multi-million-dollar deal, things like that. Where our specific methodology, and there's tons of them out there, I'd be more than happy to give you resources, where our specific process isn't tuned into as of yet, is if you're selling to, say, smaller contractors. But I've got a good friend, I think it's called the Sell Better podcast, and they do a lot of the stuff that is on the small that is selling to smaller customers as well. So, Stephen, thank you for that. That was fantastic. And Stephen, I'm going to put the email in here. Stephen, hit me an email there and your address and stuff, and I'll make sure that you get a copy of a signed copy of the book. Great. William, how to get to the decision maker when you aren't sure who they are? Oh, that's awesome. So William is asking, how do I get to a decision maker when you aren't sure who they are? Well, first, we got to figure out the org chart. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean, I know there's some people who like get nauseous when I start talking about the org chart. And that's one of those things that we want to be able to actually discuss. You don't need that, but you can get a lot of information from the people you're buying from. And so, William, you're probably talking to somebody. We would tend to call that in our book, we would tend to call that probably an ambassador or an influencer. And so when you don't know who they are, I'll tell you the first and easy way is ask, but there's where people mess this up is they don't understand the tactics on how to. So as an example, if I say, hey, who's the real decision maker? Somebody's going to be a little upset, right? It sounds like I'm being offensive. On the other hand, if I say to somebody, hey, William, in addition to you, who else do you want involved in this decision? Right? I can then say, thanks, Stephen, I see that. I can then say, oh, and what role do they play and how do they fit into the organization? So what happens is we believe sales is 75% science and about 25% art. The art is how do you ask the question or do the thing? The science is the process, like you asked a great question. I know I need to get to the decision maker, but how do I do it? So that's one way. It's about, you can literally start to have these conversations. If you don't want to ask them about the actual people, you can play it another way, which is kind of an end around. Hey, tell me about the last time you had to make a purchase like this, do a thing like this. What did that process look like? We're getting information on the decision process. And then if they don't mention people, we say, and who all is typically involved in that and why? And then there's the other thing. Stephen asks a question, and Kevin, I'm coming to yours. Stephen asks a question, how effective is LinkedIn from a social selling in your data perspective? You can also find out a lot through Sales Navigator, through LinkedIn, going and doing company searches. There's a lot of different ways that you can actually use those tools. And then there's other tools out there which are pretty good at telling you about org charts. Like a pretty inexpensive one is Apollo.io. And then there's another one that's actually a little bit more web scraper and AI version of that called Clay, and you can use them together. So there's ways to go find it using technology and web scrapers, and then there's ways to find it having real conversations. So I hope that was helpful, William. Stephen, I didn't answer the question yet. LinkedIn and social selling. So a couple things. We know people who are good at social selling are good at other things. They're usually better at consultative selling. They're better at being client-centric. And the social selling metric I believe it comes up in the top 15, and top sellers are like 270-ish% better at it than sellers who aren't as effective. So it's still there. Kevin, great question. How does this fit into new hire assessments? And I'm just going bang, bang, bang. So keep firing them back at me if you want, y'all. So Kevin, he says, how does this fit into new hire assessments? In my opinion, it's absolutely critical. Because here's the part that no one wants to talk about. About half of salespeople haven't been given the skill sets to be successful in sales or in your company. The turnover in sales we talked about is about salespeople tend to turn over, managers too, turn over every 18 months. So problem is you have this constant cycle of people and you don't know who's going to be successful or not. It's kind of less than a coin flip as we had talked about. So we actually use a very similar process to this one. We have a process called the sales talent acquisition routine that we embed in companies. It uses a sales assessment like the one we're talking about. And it has a 91% success rate at hiring people who will perform in the top half of performers in their first year. So that's a big deal because it gets rid of all the other problems that we've talked about. Yeah, I personally would always use a hiring assessment for sales management, et cetera. And in doing so, I would always make sure that it measured the 21 core selling competencies. Most of the other things on the market, and the data will say it and the footnotes will tell you, aren't actually things intended to be used for sales. DISC, predictive index, et cetera. I think even in the footnotes of some of those, they say basically don't use it for sales. So Kevin, 100% would use it in something like that because I want to get all the data I can. So I take as little risk as possible when I'm putting a team together. All right. LinkedIn. Mike, I see you curious about prospecting being so low on your list of top performers. Can you speak to that? Yeah. And I think what it really comes down to, and it's a great question, is prospecting itself from a skill set perspective is honestly, it's more about mindset. It's more about doing the thing. Yes, don't get me wrong. You've got to be able to message, and it's gotten even more complicated since 2020. I think there's a couple things that go into it. And I think you might have identified beyond that a reason why there's one or two things on there where you have to take with a grain of salt. Because I'm going to tell you right now, nothing's perfect. I think one of the reasons is a lot of elite performers are already doing a lot of business. You saw prospecting was very low, but the thing that you might have missed was in the top 15 was farming. Not account management, but farming. And so we break sales into three areas. We say there's hunters, farmers, and account managers. Account managers protect and defend a book of business. Hunters, prospecting. Farmers, on the other hand, are very good at going sideways. So what you probably see is some of these people, and from a data perspective, is that they've had some success in sales, and they've gotten really, really good at relationship building, consultative selling, and then farming and going sideways on accounts. So their actual full-on hunting skills, which is what we called it in there, it was hunting, don't have to be as good as those who are at a lower level. So I think you identified that's a fantastic question. And quite frankly, Mike, nobody's asked me that before. So if you go to the email that's above in the chat, shoot me your address, et cetera, I will make sure that we send you a signed copy of the book too. Actually, anyone who wants a signed copy of the book, just shoot me an email so you don't have to do it here in public. So it was great. Mike, that was awesome. Thank you. See what else we got. A curious prospecting so low. That was great. Oh, yeah, Stephen, that's a great question. Now, remember, this isn't like I clearly formatted this webinar wrong, but I think hopefully it's still helpful. The idea of the webinar was not necessarily to sell you guys an assessment. It's more about we got to use an assessment as a baseline. And so Stephen asked, what's the sales assessment format? I love the sales assessment that we partner with them on because it's about a 45-minute process. On average, it's actually 46. If you want to know across 2 million people, it took 46 minutes on average. And it comes with a scoring confidence and a bunch of other stuff. It'll ask you about situations like what would you do if? And so instead of being something like a scale of 1 to 10, maybe it's 4 choices, but it's like you're presented with this situation, then what would you do? And then you just answer it like you're in a normal sales situation. So it really is sales specific instead of, I'm going to try and save that, William. It's really sales specific instead of just kind of like, tell me how you feel. Like we have a survey at the end of this that I'd love for you guys to hang around for the 30 seconds afterwards because the survey will say, hey, did you hate this or did you love this? And then it's got four other questions. But it's much more detailed because we'll ask you some questions and say the first 10 questions that'll then be asked and flipped somewhere else and asked and flipped somewhere else so that we can make sure the data is accurate. We actually had Google look at using this once. We said, well, hey, you're Google. Why don't you just create one yourself? And they went through all of our data and all of our stuff, and they said because we couldn't, because this has been around 30 years, and they saw it's got a incredibly it's incredibly good at predicting potential behaviors. So it's more of a behavioral based thing. So that's awesome. All right. Colleen, thank you, thank you, thank you. Colleen says, do you have any tips for structuring your day/week for very small teams who do farming, inbound sales, outbound sales, account management, client relationships, all in one role? Colleen, if that's you, yes, I have a definite amount of sympathy and empathy for you because that is hard when you're asked to do all those things, or your team. Yeah, I would think it measures a little bit from a standpoint of where those things are coming from. And let me take them apart one at a time. You are absolutely right to talk about structuring and scheduling. But inbound sales is an example. If you don't have something automated that'll reply within the first 5 to 60 minutes and you're doing just a calendar round robin to push it to people, you're probably losing deals. The statistics are silly. And most of the stuff I will quote on this type of stuff is all in like 60%ish range. But on inbound sales, the first person to respond, now don't do it within 30 seconds. It can't be automatic because they want to feel like a person did it, even if they know it's automated. So between 5 and 60 minutes, you should have some sort of message going out to an inbound sales. Go ahead and give them an email, go ahead and give them a calendar, give them the ability to go ahead and do it there. And then you want a phone call to happen that day too. So that kind of structure has to happen on inbound sales because otherwise, as I said, like the person to respond first has a 60% greater chance of winning the deal. So why not just automate it? HubSpot lets you do that. Forms let you do that. Lots of stuff. Farming. So farming, I would actually say a little bit different. Farming is more, it's in between the account management client relationship. It's kind of a combination of outbound with account management to some extent. You may have a set of accounts, but then as an example, if I'm working in Disney, they have all these different divisions, and all those divisions have different people who are probably similar to the one that I'm talking to or doing business with. So I think what I would tell you, the number one thing, and Colin, I'd be more than happy to talk to you about it kind of offline, or if you want, you can email me at the info@revheat. Is this the way I would go about structuring the day or the week? Is I would first say, where are we most likely to have success, or what's the piece that's going to be the easiest for us to get into and the easiest for us to have conversations around? The second thing I'd say is the second thing would be what's the piece that we need to do in order to be more successful than others? What's the piece we have to be really successful at in order for us to meet and exceed our growth plans? And so what it might look like is this. You might say inbound's kind of weak. It is for a lot of companies, not all. So what you might end up saying is, well, account management, because we need to protect and defend because we're in an industry that has high turnover. But farming, because we're typically selling something to somebody for $50,000, but we know we could sell them a $500,000 more. Well, then farming is something that we want to definitely put at the top. And I would do your allocation of hours during your week based upon priorities, and that's how I determine how many. But I would definitely do one thing out of all of that. Time block. Time block. If you're prospecting, whether you 50 minutes, break for 10 to get a drink, do 50, break for 10 to get a drink, fine, but block it off. And then make sure that everybody honors the calendar commitments. When you start running your own calendar, I will tell you this, my friends, when you start running your own calendar, the very first people you got to train on your calendar are all those other people who think they can just take time from you whenever the heck they want. So Colleen, I know that wasn't the world's most specific answer, but I hope it gave you a little bit. And like I said, I'd be more than happy to talk about it further. I know we're coming up, and so Steven's got another one. Steven, as a rep, how did you determine your forecast and what was going to close versus what was pushed out? It's a great question. So what we implement with all the companies we work with, and the reps don't like it at first, Steven, so I'll be honest, but they love it 3 quarters in, is we implement a commit and a best case forecast. And so at the beginning of a quarter, it depends on your sales cycle a little bit. So if you have a very quick turn and you're doing 13 or 14 deals and those things are turning in 1 or 2 conversations, this is something that you're probably talking about commit for the month instead of for the quarter. You'll change your duration. But what I'm looking at is I'm saying, okay, if I've got these deals, which deals are 80% that they'll close within a specific time frame? Those are the deals that I'm looking at and going, okay, these could all go into it. If I have to do a forecast for a month or a quarter or whatever it is, any deal where I haven't talked to them in, say, a month, that's something I'm pushing out to the next quarter. Any deal where I don't have a next step already scheduled, I'm probably pushing that out to the next month at least. Because the thing that we have to understand is a deal in motion stays in motion, right? It's just a rub off of an old cliche, but that's totally true. And so what we're trying to do when we look at it, I want you to change the lens just a little bit because I just was talking with a sales team about this yesterday. Think about the number, not necessarily all the deals. And here's what I mean by that. Say you have 3 deals that are all 70% in your head. You should feel pretty good you're going to close one of them. Let's just assume for a second. The data says you should probably close 2. So depending on how confident you are. So what you'll do is you'll take the number from the 1 or the 2 or the average of them. And then it won't matter which of the 3 you close because you'll have gotten the number right. Most of the time, what we're really looking for, people will ask about an account, but quite frankly, what we're really looking for is what's the forecasted revenue. And so that's how you want to think about that process. But make sure that it's, do I have it? Is it in motion? Have I talked to it recently? Do I have it? Do I have an additional meeting set up with it? Those types of things. Now, before everybody jumps, I've got a question for you, and that is this, because we're continually working this. Thank you guys for all. Most of you came from the SalesFit Insider newsletter. If you haven't been there, it's https://newsletter.getsalesfit.com. But we're doing these webinars, and we're doing 2 a month. We got one more next week, which is on how fitness can help fuel your sales success, and then we'll start doing probably 1 a week in 2025. My question to you is this, because I have some of you on here who can actually answer. Do you like this format where you get to come in and just ask some questions? Like if we were to set kind of, hey, here's a topic and it's a Q&A thing. Because what we could end up doing is then structuring it where once a month we have this type of thing. And we said, hey, here's the things we're going to start the conversation with. Here's a 15-minute opener. And then we are just going to drill into the things that are important for you. And I'm just curious, by thumbs up or something in the chat, or a yes, if that's an idea you like, can you just give me a quick vote? And no can stink too. There's a thumbs up, so that's helpful. All right, not everybody's playing. All right, I saw hands go up. I saw some other stuff. I appreciate it. What I want to do is I just want to encourage you, whether you reply to us when we send you the newsletter, whatever, I see them all right now. And I'd love to know what it is you want that's going to make you more successful. And whether or not you're a CEO, a sales manager, an individual contributor, we built this program to help individuals be successful. And if those individuals happen to run a company, great. But if those individuals tend to do, thank you, Colleen. Yeah, that's a great idea. Whether those individuals tend to be individual contributors, I just don't think there's enough out there for people who are trying to make a success. We have individual sellers who have gone from being on a PIP and doing $60,000 a year in just salary, no commissions, to 3 years later making more than $600,000. Those are the stories that give me goosebumps, and I want to see more of those for you. Oh, Mike, thank you. Mike asks a quick question. He likes this format. How do we listen to next week's Zoom if we are traveling? I'm recording all of these so I can get it to you. Or if you come into the, like, I don't know if you're traveling, like going to be in a car and it's going to be okay. But if you're traveling, you can always pick it up on your phone if you can get to Zoom. Otherwise, you guys all have the secret email at this point, info@revheat.com. Shoot that to me. And I will make sure that you can get a copy of it. So that's it, y'all. So remember this last thing. If you want to take advantage and figure out where you are, we've got our partner, that OMG assessment, which is, I'm telling you what, it's life-changing from a standpoint of your professional career. $400 instead of $1,000, plus you get the call with me and actually get to diagnose it and all the other good stuff. So if you're interested in that, just hit me at info@revheat. Let me know. We have next week's seminar, or next week's webinar is Thursday. You'll see an update on that in the Sales Fit Insider newsletter. But other than that, I really appreciate you interacting, you coming here, and you looking out for your best interest, because nobody cares about you more than you. So we just want to give you the tools to be successful. So if you'll hang around for 2 seconds, and I'll answer Steven's real quick. But if you'll hang around for 2 seconds and answer the survey, I'd appreciate it. Last one. Steven, I'm a top performer, hit quota, but feel there's more gas in the tank. What would you say to someone like myself? I'd say you're right. And I'd say the problem that top performers have, no, you don't want to hear me on my soapbox, folks. This is when you this is when you leave. But here's my soapbox. Top performers, you're in the hardest position in sales today. You're making money, you're doing well, everybody's looking up to you, but your team doesn't understand, your sales manager and your leader don't understand that you want to be surrounded with other people like you. So there's 2 things. You have to take it on yourself to become better. It's part of the reason we built Sales Fit Insiders, because we want top performers, or as the movie Atlas Shrugged called it, prime movers, to take control of their destiny and pick the things that they want to work on to be better, because nobody else is going to drive you the way that you want to. Nobody else is as interested in your success and your family's success as you are. And the number one thing I will tell you is that you have to take accountability for your own success and failure. And if you're a top performer, you already do. Problem is, it's got to go through the next level. The story I'll end with is this. And we had a sales rep, was doing great. Took an individual account. He was a client partner. He took an individual account from 400,000 in annual sales to 40 million. Actually, it was to 20 million. Let me tell the story right. It was to 20 million in sales. And then in the end of 2023, I say, why can't it be a $30 million account? Or why can't it be 40 at the end of 2025? And he looks at me and he's like, you're crazy. That's insane. We have coaching calls every other week. I do it again, and I do it again. Then his wife knows we talk all the time. He talks to his wife about it. She goes, why can't it be? Short story bearable. That account did $38 million for him this year. Steven, so what I mean by that is this. Sometimes our own expectations about what's going on in our world, what's possible, are our limiting factors. And the loudest voice in your head is always going to be your voice. So keep reading Sales Fit Insider. You're always welcome to reach out to me, guys. I don't need to get paid for every phone call I take. Reach out to me, shoot me an email. I can certainly find some time. And then just keep watching that, because Steven I'll foreshadow it. We'll have a program that's built exactly for people who are in the position you are, because what we want to do is help people hit that next level. And I know what it feels like to ram your head into the ceiling and not understand that there's a staircase that you can take. So I hope that's helpful. Thank everybody. Please stay around. I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar here. You've been awesome. If you loved it, tell somebody, help them get into the newsletter. Shoot me something that says you loved it. But the survey is coming up right now. I promise you, it's like 4 or 5 questions. Thank you so much for coming, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.